Welcome, everyone, to the Be Well with Dr. Michelle Greenwell podcast. And it's my pleasure today to introduce you to Cheryl Brewster, the owner of Intuitive Life, Inspiring Conscious Change Makers. Hello, Cheryl.
Hey, Michelle, good to be here today.
I want to share a little bit about you so the people have an idea who's going to be speaking the wisdom that's coming today. So, you are a transition specialist, transformational speaker, and a spiritual mentor. And you inspire individuals and organizations keen to make big differences in the world and to find the hidden treasures within the challenges they face. And your story is one of extraordinary trust and the ability to ride the waves of change, because in 2004, you left a very successful career in the corporate world to follow your calling and founded the Intuitive Life to provide intuitive consultations, workshops, and training for individuals and organizations. That's a big jump.
That was huge, huge leap of faith.
Yes. And in 2010, you had family health crisis plunge you deeper into your own deeper walk and tested every ounce of your faith and stamina. So I'm looking forward to how you can share what grew out of that. And as a result today, you're going to be sharing what you've discovered about the right mindset, severe challenges, and how they can be catalysts for powerful positive change. And we're calling this reflecting as a way of knowing, because you and I wanted to talk about how reflection can really change our perspective and the way we look at things.
Absolutely. It's definitely life-changing. And, reflection is a skill that is learned that we really don't pay enough tribute to for its effectiveness. So we'll have a good chat today.
So I want to share a quote, a testimonial about your work, and I thought this would give people a little bit of perspective. So this links both personal and business growth. So this is the quote. "You have to work with Cheryl if you want to develop your potential more. This woman has a phenomenal capacity to help you see what holds you back and to confront it, to make a difference in your life. And in the workplace, this isn't about making someone a better sales or IT person, although it could be. It's about transforming you so that no matter what your insight profile is, you have the ability to perform more to your potential. Cheryl's individual and group work was more than what I expected and far more relevant to me than I could have ever imagined." That was Tom Carson of Corporate Insights. He's a trainer out of Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
That's so beautiful, because I think people also forget, they're working on their personal journey, but they forget how that personal journey really impacts their business journey and the kind of person they want to be in the corporate world.
Absolutely. Whoever whoever we are is going to show up no matter where we are. And, we can tend to put a lot more emphasis on corporate because it's related to survival and making income and supporting a family. But at the end of the day, it's who we are as people that get the results,
Hmm.
uh, you know, and and also define the meaning that we get from those results.
Hmm.
So it's uh it's a really, really important mindset that to be really effective in the workplace and effective as communicators, how we function at home is actually the definition of success in the outer world.
And a lot of people are forgetting that when they're chasing that corporate piece or building their business, and they're focused. I'm thinking of myself at the moment.
Oh, yeah, me too.
There's no boundaries on a schedule, You're working
Yeah.
across all these time zones. You're always trying to fit people into the right spots. But what that impact is and what it means about the person that you are. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can have your own business and still get caught up. And you can even have a spiritual business and still get caught up. So it's like, okay, alrighty then. Let's just slow things down, which is what reflection does.
Hmm. Hmm. So as we get started today, we always start with a cup of tea so we can get everybody into the flow of the conversation and into a healing opportunity for them. So what did you pack today as your inspiration?
My inspiration, you mean in terms of tea?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't brewed it yet, but it's ready to go. Rose petal tea. That, when I first started my work and teaching workshops, I would always make rose petal tea. And it's comforting. And I also am drawn to, the energies that we work with invisibly. And Kuan Yin to me represents love and also really, I want to say, wiping the tears of the world is
Mm,
what she represents for me. So in my spiritual settings, I'll make a rose tea and also call in Kuan Yin.
beautiful. I
Mhm.
love that. So I chose a blend today that has rose petals in it, and I have actually added rose petals to quite a few blends because there is that little component, and it's like putting a little piece of sunshine when you put the herbs into the infuser, and the rose petals are sitting on the top. Sometimes calendula or safflower as
Mhm.
well, and you get that bright orange and yellow. But the rose petal, there just is something about, because very often it's in the shape of a heart. It's usually in a heart color with a pink or a magenta or white. It's just such a beautiful flower.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what I chose today is my Mission for Change community tea. So I always stumble on that one. But I'm just going to hold the label up so people can see. And I wanted to draw attention to this because you and I are going to talk about reflection. And we've already expressed a little bit between personal and business. And then there's this idea of community. And what
Absolutely.
community do we belong to if it's a personal one or it's a business one? And how do we fit within the community and within ourselves? So this one, the intention on it, so all the teas at the Cape Breton Tea Company have an intention. In community, we are empowered for change. And when we engage with someone for the capacity to heal, our enzymes immediately know how to transform to go to healing. It's the most amazing gift we have in our body. And so I wanted to bring that forward because this tea helps support a family in Malawi, Africa, who really do struggle. And they struggle a lot with a lot of things that we don't have here in North America. With malaria, they still have COVID running through. Diabetes is huge because they have really poor water quality. And so the opportunity for us to be able to bring that healing component and share it forward and bring forward the herbs, it just brings me such a joy to know that you can bring a group of people together around a tea and then create that change and the inspiration for something else. So,
Mhm.
so thank you for letting me share that little piece, but also for being in on this conversation. So with what you have in your glass, shall we do a cheers? And for those
Absolutely.
people that are listening, cheers to them.
Here's to intention.
Hmm. And I wanted to share, I pulled a card for us today, so we also would have a little inspiration coming our way. And so I'm going to hold this up. So if you are listening to the podcast, I'm going to just try to describe this. It's blue and it's white. It looks like wings. And this is a coaster from the Harmony coaster set. And my tea is actually going to be sitting on this. But what I wanted to share was the intentions on the back. So the herb that comes forward, it's not really an herb, it's a root, but ginger is about strength and power for change. And we hope that we're going to be inviting people to make that kind of shift today. The note is C, which comes from the root chakra, so being grounded and stable. And the affirmations are: position yourself into the true power of being, find your roots and let them expand beneath you, and feel the strength, nourishment, circulation, and empowerment of connection.
Mm. Beautiful.
So, the community that comes to listen to this podcast, we invite you to know that you're a part of our community and that we're here supporting and opening up possibilities. So, thank you everyone for joining in. All right, Cheryl, shall we dive in?
Let's go.
All right. So let's start with, we should really go to what was the catalyst that had you move from the corporate world? I mean, that's stability and opportunity, and shift your focus. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. I went through an experience that I think most of us are going through right now, which is really listening to the call of the soul. It was like a calling. And I knew intuitively, I knew in my heart that if I didn't shift from corporate to what my heart was calling me to, that I literally would have missed the point of the lifetime. So it was a really kind of heavy duty knowing. It was exciting, but also heavy duty because I was stepping completely into the unknown, uh, massive uncertainty, and basically left security and, predictability and income to start from scratch. And so the journey has been so rewarding because when you're living from the calling of the soul, that's the true meaning and purpose of life. And as I take my work back now into corporate, even more so, I have an understanding that it's not so much what you do as how you do it and why you do it. So that was what prompted me to make that huge shift. And looking back in retrospect, I really have a appreciation for business and how it operates, because we live in both a spiritual world and a physical tangible world, and both need to be united and integrated to be effective.
Now, that's interesting to think about because people don't always think about the spiritual aspect of what they're doing in their business.
Exactly. And so at the end of the day, and this is a really really cool theme of experiences that I want to speak to today. At the end of the day, I had an out of body death experience a few years ago, and I was told I had a second chance to come back. And the message was, whatever you do, if you haven't done it with love, you've missed the point.
Wow.
Yeah. And my oldest son, when he was 3 or 4, I was giving him a bath, and out of the blue, we were both quiet, we weren't talking. Out of the blue, he goes, you know, Mom, Mommy, it's all about love. And I looked at him. I said, yes, it is. And just in this past week, my ex-husband, the father of my children, passed away unexpectedly. And one of the last things he said to my youngest son was, at the end of the day, it's just about love.
Mm.
So this podcast comes at a very poignant time for me personally, because I can see in my own life where I've come from love and where I haven't.
Hmm.
So this topic of reflection is very exciting and important, because in reflection, we have the neuroscience now that we didn't have before to understand that the brain goes into fight, flight, freeze. We know that already. But with reflection, we have an opportunity to slow things down, to create these new neural pathways that we need, that really connect and integrate and form a baseline that is unshakable. So, where we're going through in the world today, from my experience in life, is that within us we have the capacity of our inner intelligence. That utmost intelligence inside of us is a capacity to change the world. How do we do that? By reflecting inside, being very rigorous and saying, where have I not been living from love? Because the power of love is the power of course correction, it's the power of harmony, and it's the power of change. So our primal brain doesn't so much like change. It's looking for protection, it's looking for threat. And when we introduce the idea of love, the calming effect that happens, so that we're using our whole brain rather than just that knee-jerk reaction brain. So today's podcast and in our connection, Michelle, with the amazing work that you do and the work that you do with trauma, is every time we slow down, do a reflection, and ask, is this an energy gain or an energy drain? It's the return to love. So reflection happens in many different forms, which we'll talk about. Initially, I just want to say, for all of us, in this moment, have I slowed down enough to be present with the beauty of the world and the beauty of the world inside me? Do I appreciate myself? Do I respect myself? Do I love myself? Am I learning? Am I growing? Am I expanding? And to use the breath to slow down and really allow that in the moment, because it just takes one conscious breath to change the entire trajectory of our day.
Mm-hmm. You are right. Yeah. And, we spend so much time in front of our computers or sitting in a car or sitting at a table or a desk, and that quality of breath, we don't realize how we've changed that quality of the breath, and we lose track of where it actually should be. And it's not until we decide to go for a walk where we require a deeper breath that we realize that capacity is no longer there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this return to the simplicity of what's most important. And I teach a program called Embrace Your Inner Pirate, and it's ended up being a year-long program. And the pirate represents the breaking the rules of conformity, or breaking the rules of limitation, of the limiting beliefs, breaking the rules and returning back to the simplicity and the wisdom that is inside of us, slowing down. So, and the power of this is that we can go deep so quick, so fast, and incorporating this consistently. That's the key. It has to be consistent, which is why I'm such a fan of reflection, which actually is quite new in my life, because I've just taken some courses on adult education, and that's where you and I first connected, because of course you're training with the brain and how it works. And one of the things that really struck me was the power of reflection, based on, experiences don't really change it. It's reflecting on them. That's the transformation.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so we can, even the quality of a movement, because some people just think that if I sit on my chair, that's going to be good enough. Or if I go walking with the posture that I've had all day, that's okay. And that there is this, I guess, acceptance of what has been, and then that opportunity to go, that's not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
We have to really be present and realize, no, one shoulder is lower than the other one, and your neck's turning funny, and you're going to walk for 3 kilometers with a heavy stride because you want to get your workout, and you didn't ask the body yet, is it ready? Is it primed to go? Is the breath ready to be deep? And then, are you going to be present with nature?
Beautiful questions. And again, it's that reflection, it's that asking, it's learner's mindset, rather than just kind of going along with what you've already done during the day. It's like, changing gears, taking the time to change gears.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I think people do too is, and I'm guilty of this, is that long period of time where there is no reflection, there is no, you're just so focused in where you're going and what needs to get done, that space you leave for reflection becomes just tiny little snippets, instead of, if you weave it throughout the day, that you can pick it up, carry it, transform things, transform challenges that you have in what you're working on, and then progress from there. So it becomes a weaving rather than so much of a, in this 10 minutes, here's what I'll do. And then I'm going to solve everything in that 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes more of a flow, and really paying attention, using the mindfulness, you know, um, am I, am I enjoying this moment? Am I being effective in this moment? Am I, is there flow and the willingness to change it up if there isn't, rather than pushing? I'm a big fan of Hawkins' work in Power versus Force, and it's so using reflection to remind us that everything is already here. Am I relaxing into it? Am I trusting it? Or am
Mm-hmm.
I pushing because I'm coming from a place of scarcity and lack where, the small self or the personality self is, got this huge burden to, got to produce, got to be on time, got to do this, got to do that. And before you know it, we're just like consumed with stress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about just when we started our conversation today, and you were talking about that love and love within, and I was thinking, okay, so where would the love be missing? Because I really am passionate about all the things that I do, but then I realized my house doesn't get the love the same way. I'm not noticing the corners that really could use an extra vacuuming. Or the windows that are covered in cat nose prints.
Yeah,
It's like, I'll get there. But there's a love that goes with the space that you are within and how you take care of that space as well, as much as you also have what you're taking care of inside yourself. And sometimes we're so busy at critiquing how we have not taken care of ourselves, but we can sometimes look to the outside and say, okay, how can I change things on the outside? And all of a sudden the inside is going to be reflective.
exactly. And what I've really appreciated over the last little while is this this surrendering to this infinite intelligence inside of me. It's intelligent. It knows what to do. It's already got it. And it's like, well, why wouldn't I slow down and listen to that intelligence, as opposed to kind of get off this hamster wheel that's very easy to stay on, because in many ways it's so addictive. And we can become addicted to thinking all the time, or become addicted to these emotions that aren't necessarily the best for us, that adrenaline rush of getting things done. So I thought what I do is share with you today, my biggest learning from reflection, because it it it's a meaning making process. It brings meaning to life, and it helps us see where we can course correct. And in my experience as an intuitive, it's a very practical tool to integrate so that we're staying grounded. And in these times of massive change, because there is so much uncertainty, and we're all needing to grow, and that certainty that we're used to isn't necessarily there. So part of reflection then is it becomes a very rigorous way of thinking, and I love that, uh, because it taps into the joy of the soul. It taps into the joy of who am I, why am I here, and it really draws on inspiration, and it draws on this motivation, so that now we have the energy to make the changes that may not be very comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so there comes an appreciation of being in discomfort, that actually is a sign of growth. And it depends on our outlook. Am I looking at discomfort because I feel I haven't done enough? Or am I looking at discomfort because I recognize that change is uncomfortable to this old brain, and that the prefrontal cortex, or the newer part of the brain, um, it knows what it's doing. So I just really appreciate the attitudes that also make up reflection. So, am I being present? Am I being kind? And uh, am I really giving myself what I most want? And so it becomes a course correction in the studies that they've done at Harvard and around the world, where executives are taking the time to reflect uh, the the effectiveness and the career movement that they have made on those who take the time to reflect. That's what makes those people exceptional. So I love what the business world is doing with reflection. And I love what happens from a spiritual perspective, because when we reflect spiritually, especially if it's written, and again, the science approves that handwritten reflection is actually very powerful. But what's most powerful, which ties into your tea today, is sharing that reflection in community.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's interesting you said handwritten
Mm-hmm.
over being able to type it into your computer.
Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, that's effective as well, but handwritten slows the brain down, and you're using different parts of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've described, and again, in all the research I've done, they've described reflection is like jogging for the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we all understand that in order to create change in your life, you need to create these new neural pathways. Well, the way we do that, information's good, but the transformation only comes from reflection and then acting on that reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really loved was once I started using that reflective tool more in my own journaling, it was like, whoa, I I had been missing all of these insights. And when I started writing and reflecting more, I was like, wow, there's a lot here. And I truly found it and continue to find it life changing.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we're going through these massive transitions, whether it's in business or in relationship, and let's talk about change, because change is inevitable, predictable, and yet, how much do we resist it?
Yeah.
So, reflection is the fuel that really feeds the fire of our potential and our ability to take action even when it's difficult.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about the companies that do spend that time of yes, you have your board meeting, and yes, you have your group meeting and your project meeting, but also that time to sit and have the cup of tea and just chit chat, because that chit chat leads to other things. And like you said, that reflection, even on the project, just because you actually spend a little bit more time with the person, getting to know the person and then starting to understand their perspective and where they're coming from, draws out new ideas, draws out areas that people wouldn't know to discover because they were so busy working on their aspect of the project in relation to what everybody else was expected to give. And it just creates that cohesiveness and an all-encompassing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really describes the culture of an organization, because, uh, you know, it's all about connection. And you look at the health of any relationship, and especially as you say with corporate or with business, it's like, okay, what are we all up to here? Why are we here? Why are we doing what we're doing? And how are we doing it? I mean, how much toxicity is there in the workplace? It's huge. It's off the charts. And it's like, well, it's needless. We really, need to evolve here in terms of healthy workplaces,
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that, unfortunately, toxicity in the workplace is a fact of life. However, that's what leadership is about, and we lead from the inside out, every single one of us. So
Mm-hmm.
being a responsible leader in your own life
Hmm.
and having the compassion and the willingness to see the blind spots within yourself. And that's why I love reflection too, because it's like, whoa, I never saw that before. Thank goodness I'm seeing it now. And the ability to course correct much more quickly because you've identified a false self within you that isn't required. And, our attachment to suffering is what we're really letting go of here in these deeper levels of leadership, recognizing that a true seeker, a, a seeker of truth, has dropped the need to stay in suffering.
Now, it's an interesting way to put that, isn't it? Because I know people be thinking, what do you mean? But then you start to reflect on, where do you go where you keep hitting the brick wall? Are you banging your head against the wall because somebody wasn't listening and the orders didn't go through the way that they should have gone through, and it's a constant juggle of craziness? What is that telling us? Yeah.
And the impact that we can have.
Hmm.
Uh, it's pretty amazing considering um, at the I got something. I want to show you this, and for those who can't see, who are not watching this, and you're only getting the audio, this is something I created for one of the classes that I teach, and I also teach it in corporate and in communication. It's a Latin phrase, memento mori, which is remember your death. And you can print out these special calendars, and this is one that I use in my program because it's 90 days. And you color a block for each day, and you begin to realize that 90 days goes by real fast. Well,
Hmm.
the average age of a Canadian is 82 before they pass on. Fortunately, in my experience, it's much higher than 82 with the people in my life, which I'm grateful for. However, when we sit down, we do this exercise, we realize that by really, uh, really owning the short time that we're all here and recognizing that we are infinite beings, but our physical bodies are limited. And so to recognize that the person that you're going to work with or talking to may not be there tomorrow. You may not be there tomorrow. So what's most important? So this whole idea of reflection then, I think, really puts things in perspective so that we begin to become more aware that we have within us the capacity for powerful positive change and the willingness to let go of this old way of doing things which insists on keeping the suffering or the regret or whatever that is. And the the courage and the audacity to forgive,
Hmm.
power of forgiveness.
Yes. And such a tough one to forgive ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's our addiction to self sabotage, which is the unwillingness to forgive.
Hmm.
And so recognizing and calling it out. And it becomes pretty exciting when, and this is why, I'm such a fan of your work and what you're up to here. Because when we work with the power of intention and inspiration, we tap into the motivation that allows us to move forward, even though there may be a part that still doesn't want to.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, this courage and this excitement and this inspiration, so that even though there's difficult things to do, we can do them and we are doing them. And that is the call of the soul. And so, in my line of work, I'm also teaching spiritual intelligence, which is, it's not about religion, it's not about dogma. What it's about is living true to your values no matter where you go. Are you being the same person showing up as you are at home or at work?
Mm-hmm.
Are you being the same person with your family as someone that you want to impress?
Yeah. Now that's a good question.
Isn't that a good question? It's like, oh, well, how do you like me so far? Right?
Oh, and the family that knows all your skeletons in the closet and
And
still shows up. Yeah.
loves you anyway. So this sense of, wow, what would happen if we embrace the unconditional love, which would mean letting go of our attachment to suffering.
Mhm,
And I think if we all took a really good hard look at that, we'd be flabbergasted at how simple that is, and yet the courage that is required. And again, going back to Hawkins' work on the scale of emotions, courage is what changes everything.
mhm,
As soon as we and embrace the courage, we are moving up the scale of consciousness. We are using negative emotion to heal the heart.
mhm,
And I love that because now we have, this place to really embrace what's not working with compassion so that what wasn't working, the blessing in disguise is we found something that we didn't know before.
mhm,
And that's the power of reflection. And so, it's like there are no bad parts. Let's just all take a collective deep sigh here and recognizing that the world needs our leadership. And it begins by each one of us saying, am I leading from love in myself, for myself, so that I can be fully there for my family, for my clients, for my colleagues, for the world? And I truly, from my own experience in, living in both worlds and continually asking, how can I be more effective in my life? How can I be more effective in business? How can I be more effective as a mother? How can I be more effective in really walking the talk and living this truth and being willing to look at my own blind spots and embrace them with compassion and love? Because this journey that we're on in this amazing world we live in is one of discovery, it's one of learning. And the only thing that takes us higher is, and again, the point of reflection. What have I learned today? How am I different than I was at the beginning of the day? I mean, change, profound change can happen that fast. And then when we look back, like, wow, I'm such a different person than I was 10 years ago. And yet 10 years ago on a certain day, it was like, oh, how am I going to make this happen? Well, you did. So celebrate that. And also now bring it into any blind spots where you're holding yourself back, and be willing, be open to what wants to move through you, and consider that, when we're going through challenges, Napoleon Hill said that there is an equal or greater benefit to everything that comes into our life.
mhm, mhm. Wow. So tell me a little bit, because you're coaching in the corporate world. Are you working with clients separately as well? How are you sharing these
Yeah.
skills?
Yeah. So I work basically in three different ways. From a spiritual perspective, I work one on one, and I also work in groups. On a corporate perspective, I'm bringing in effective communication tools into the workplace.
Mhm,
And then also, as someone who loves to learn, I'm a researcher, as are you. I also have my Bachelor of Metaphysics. I'm currently working on my Master's of Metaphysics, which to me is just like, oh, so exciting because we're, again, we're tapping into the potential within ourselves. And
Hmm.
so it's that continual upward spiral. So to answer your question, yes, I work one-on-one in groups and also in speaking. And on the ministerial side, uh, supporting and celebrating with people, and whether it's weddings and especially end of life.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Hmm. That puts you in a unique position with what you've just had for this last week. Um, and so one of the things that I got from Therapeutic Touch was how to be able to support people as they approach their end of life, but also for the caregivers. Is there something that you could share with the audience about some of the gifts that you have because of the avenue you've chosen to go down and what you've chosen to study?
Absolutely. I've done a lot of speaking to caregiver groups. They're near and dear to my heart, and I want to get back to that because I haven't been speaking to them as much as I was before. And I'm currently working with people who are going through grief. And so the bottom line is recognizing that resilience is inside of you, even though it doesn't feel that way. And that when we have an unexpected event in our lives, we can be here and then suddenly we're down at the bottom, and that's just a part of the process. And we'll be down there for a while, and it's a funky place to be. And that's where we'll experience the sadness. And my biggest reflection for people to consider is learn from regret, but don't hang on to it. It's really not required. But it is part of the grieving process. That is where we go.
Hmm.
And so use it to be more present with the people still in your life.
Hmm.
Learn from it. And one of the best pieces of advice that someone gave me years and years ago when my best friend passed on unexpectedly, we had both just turned 30. And this is what I pass on to others when I'm counseling them with grief, is if you had been the one to go first, how would you want your loved one to carry on? So that's the first one. The second one is, because you are the one here, live your life the way they would have wanted you to live it.
Hmm.
Because so often we can feel, and again, it's that grieving process that does take time. And yet, at the end of the day, and I can say this because it's part of my own personal experience, that I have, experienced the out of body death experience, and I did go into oneness. I did go into bliss. And when I came back, was told, talk about this, let people know. And so, in some of my intuitive work, quite often those who passed on will come into a session. And yeah, I mean, when you're having a direct experience of that, it's not something you're making up, it's real. So we have these connections in all these different dimensions. And as we continue to be open to the bigger picture of life and to ask ourselves, is this thought an energy gain or an energy drain that will bring us back to our center? Because our loved ones, whether they're here or passed on, at the end of the day, what matters is how much love are we bringing into this moment and into our experience. And love can be a very, I want to say, general word or general term. And it's like, how alive am I allowing myself to be? And
Hmm.
how am I taking care of myself in this moment? Because sadness is something that is blessed and beautiful in the transitions that we go through. And I just, I'm a big proponent of the word joy. And joy doesn't mean the absence of sorrow. It means the embracing of it and working with it.
Hmm. And I was just, when you were talking about sadness, and I was thinking you need that sadness for your reflective time. And it becomes so important to recognize the space, the space that's needed. And then how that space, as it transforms, what comes in to join it, which is really,
Absolutely.
which is really like a flower garden. I was just thinking of the tea, and I was thinking about all the petals, all the flowers that are sitting there, and then how that reflective time after you've weeded, I'll put it in quotation marks, weeded the garden to make the space, but then how everything decides how it's going to come forward, and then the bounty that comes out of that and the beauty.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
there's such a beauty and a bounty in all of life's moments, whether it's birth or death or in between. Life is a continuum, and I think that when we go through these experiences, uh, we must remember we're undoing a lot of old thinking. Death in many ways is so final because you don't have the physical body anymore, but the spirit is eternal. It always has been, it always will be.
Mhm.
And so and it's not about, I have I have a friend who who would call himself an atheist, and he says, "But Cheryl," he says, "you make me want to believe in God," and yet, even though he's what I would call an atheist, we have such a connection. There's,
Mhm.
it's like his way of living is to be so totally present that it transcends any label he could assign to himself or anyone else.
Mhm.
And he's,
Mhm.
just this dear soul, and one of my dearest friends, and I just love him to bits. We have this connection. So again, I think we're in a time of such transition, and it's a time of the leadership of love and the willingness to slow down enough to say, I'm not giving myself as much as I could in this moment.
Mhm.
Because when our cup is full, then we have the energy to really be of service, whether it's to our family, to our workplace, or to the world.
Mhm. Mhm. And I'm just thinking about, I'm reflecting on what you were saying about regret, and that we don't have to hold it. So I wanted to bring that forward one more time, because as people are thinking about what you've added to the conversation, for those that are still holding on to that regret, why and what happens if you let it go?
Exactly. And recognizing, am I willing to let it go so that I am freeing myself into a more expansive state? Am I willing to let it go so that I'm choosing not to be in the suffering, because the suffering depletes.
Mhm.
And I also overheard something, and I forget who said it, but he said, choose your regrets wisely, because I mean, there's only so much time in the day. You can't do everything. So choose your regrets really wisely. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. So quite often we can use regret, I believe, as an excuse to not grow.
Mhm.
And, I've experienced enough in my life now to be able to get very good, because of reflection, to call myself out and go, wait a minute, what are you doing here? Let's get back. And I think it comes down to a non negotiable decision, which is this. When we study neuroscience in the brain, we begin to realize there's a negativity bias because of, the old brain that's constantly looking for danger. It's predisposed to that. So we need to be aware, okay, yes, there's a predisposition for negativity bias. So what will I intelligently do about that? And in the research that I was doing, I came across an author who wrote a book called Negative Legacy Emotions. And he described these negative legacy emotions as ineffective guilt. Guilt serves a productive purpose when it creates positive change moving forward. But if it's guilt that's irrational, if it's guilt that doesn't produce any positive movement forward or change, and I love what he says. He says that's an ineffective remnant from evolution that we do not need. And in that book, I just love it. He goes, you have to make this non-negotiable decision that you will no longer take dictation from these lower places of emotion. And that's why reflection is so important too, because we're bopping along, and if we're not questioning what we're doing or what we're thinking, how can anything new possibly come in? So perhaps, and for those listening to this podcast, because I know that synchronicity is a signpost. If you're listening to this, in this moment, what if we all let go of ineffective guilt, of the ineffective ways we push ourselves? We let it go. We made a different choice right now to use the breath and consciously, deliberately came back to the power of this infinite intelligence inside of us. And that is the only way to live. And anything less will harbor fear, ineffectiveness, and it just isn't very much fun. So I'm all about fun. So can we have more fun in making these changes that we know we need to make intuitively? Can we have more fun in being open and recognize that we don't have to take things so personally, that we don't have to be so fragile? We really do have a strength inside of us. We need to put our attention there. And that is the power of reflection. Very intentional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you know, I'm thinking about how the day goes by and the way we easily slide into those thought patterns because of the way we've been sitting, the way we've been drinking or not drinking enough water, the way we maybe had enough nutrition, didn't have enough nutrition for the day, and how those thought patterns have weaved their way into our thought process and delivered us this opportunity to hold on or to let go, and to be able to recognize through that reflective moment that some of those things they're not yours. They
Yes.
show up, but they only show up because of the circumstances with which you've kind of prepared yourself for the day. And then on that reflection, that opportunity to realize they're not yours. You can let them go rather than bringing them in, holding on to them, and then they weren't yours to begin with, but they sure dictate the whole rest of what's going to happen. Yeah.
Exactly. I love what you just said. I'm getting goosebumps because it's like, oh, how much have we taken on? Again, thinking that, oh, and it's like, oh, so how exciting, Michelle. I mean, it's just so exciting and rewarding and inspiring and important to breathe into the posture
Mm-hmm.
of expansion, the
Mm-hmm.
the posture of what is good, the posture of, I call it your power pose, when you need to switch gears and you stand up and you do your power pose, and it's like, uh yes, life can be difficult, and it can also be extraordinarily inspiring and rewarding and meaningful and powerful. And I look at all the I look at what inspires me and who inspires me, and I always come back to this one thing, which is beauty. When you
Hmm.
think about it, any person that really has inspired you or had an impact on your life has brought about something beautiful into the world.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's a really great measure of success. And it also ties into something you said earlier, which is um, our outer world reflecting our inner world, and how we can take a break in a day and just go you know spend 10 or 15 minutes in the kitchen, and it's a productive break and you still got something done, because now you're bringing excitement or beauty to an area, and you can actually enjoy the process. It's like cleaning a messy closet. It's like, oh, oy vey, and it's like, no, wait a minute. uh you know
Always feels so good when it's clean and ready to go and organized. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's one of the things too, in the kitchen is I have to clean the kitchen before I start
Mhm.
so that everything looks and is ready. And then it's like, now I can cultivate,
Yes.
which is the same as when you look at the closet. If the closet is a disaster and things are falling out in all directions, it makes it really hard for you to make a decision or to be even engaged with your clothes in a way that, how is this going to look on me? What is the beauty that comes from what I decide I'm going to wear today? And then how is that going to make me feel? But how is it going to make the people who are looking at me feel by the colors I chose and the patterns and the way I've put it together? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the joy of being real,
Hmm.
doing something out of joy as opposed to image,
Hmm.
or and that, how that translates across. And we we live in a world where there's just uh it's like, okay, I love what Course in Miracles says. It says, uh nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. Which, when you talk about color, and it's like, yeah, you know be that unique self, be that wild and crazy fuchsia pink lady, or wear a pirate hat on your head or whatever. But this invitation to shine, and like that Marianne Williamson poem, to be able to shine without fear of recrimination, or fear of rejection. Just shine, just be your incredible you know uh self, with all of your foibles. And I taught a class not long ago, or I have a monthly intention setting evening the first Tuesday of every month, and we were talking about, like, oh, your blind spots. And it's like, hey, let's just carbonate that negativity, right? Let's make it more fun. And so it's like foibles rather than faults, right? Because the human condition is such that we're waking up and becoming aware of things we weren't aware of before, and it's almost embarrassing. Like, I love this saying, like, if you're not embarrassed by who you were a year ago, then you're not risking enough. You're not, right? So it's like, okay, then let's. How many of us can fall forward, right? And so really, really kind of just embracing and choosing this this calling inside each of us. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to leave the corporate world to go follow our calling. No, your calling is what is unique within you, that wants to express itself
Hmm.
in your world, in your family. How much fun can you have with your family? How much can you heal the relationships or those miscommunications? And how much fun can you have turning around a business, or embracing something that's been difficult? Like, how rewarding. And so that to me says we are all vehicles for change. for massive growth and for massive change. And this excitement of coming together in community to say, I will contribute my best self to this world for the short time I'm here. And I will love myself into the greatest service possible that I can be.
I don't think we can add anything more to that. That phrase was so amazing. I hope people stop and write it down. That's so beautiful. So beautiful, Cheryl. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just, again, want to thank you, Michelle, for the work that you do. Every time I meet you, I'm just so impressed with how much you know and how much I learned just in just off the cuff conversation. So, uh, I just, again, maybe an opportunity here to hold the space for the love and the joy that is inside each one of us in whatever way it wants to express, whether it's through tea or movement or through speaking or creating beauty.
Hmm.
But whatever it is, we all have this within us that is meant to be shared. It is meant to be used. And even as I say this, what I'm getting is, uh, the hurt that is in the world today can be healed in magnificent ways by one breath, one internal movement that becomes an external movement. So whatever it is that calls to your heart, do it. Listen, and because that's love leading.
Exactly. Cheryl, how can people find you?
They can find me on my website, theintuitivelife.com. And for anyone who is listening to this, hey, if you found something of value here and you would like to explore further, please just reach out, go on my website. I've got my calendar link there. Book a complimentary, 15-minute session so we can get to go know each other. It'll probably end up being half an hour at least. But my service to the world is to encourage every single soul on the planet. Listen to what inspires you and go do it. And so that's how I support people, whether they're just on a spiritual journey or whether they're business people or people in transition, with massive change. We're all in this together. None of us does this work alone. And so it would be my pleasure to meet anyone who listened to this and really wants to go deeper into expressing these gifts that they have within them.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for the conversation. And I always look forward to when we do have a chat, where it heads. And I've been inspired in lots of ways today to think differently. And I so appreciate the way you drew out those different ideas. And it's in a non-threatening way, because it'd be so easy to be stuck in, you do have regrets, or, if I'd only, or can I forgive myself? And the way you've approached it, the way you expressed it is just so gentle, and that we need to be gentle with ourselves. And then it's okay. It's okay, that breath can happen, because we're not going to be holding back because of our fear of what that reflection is going to be.
Exactly. For too many years of my life, I'm so passionate about what I do. For too many years of my life, it was being so hard on myself needlessly, but I didn't understand that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I thought I had to, do better and do more, be better. And it's like, no, no, no. In that out of body death experience I had, and I didn't physically flatline, but it was an experience of, oh, I'm not here anymore. It was like I was shown the needless, unnecessary pressure and difficulty I had put in my life. And, you know, it takes time to unwind that. It doesn't, as much as I wish I could have come back completely transformed and going, woo, it was like, no, and that's why I love to encourage people to reflect and to do written reflection, because it takes time.
Mhm.
And there is such an important rebirth that takes place. We're changing our neurocircuitry. We are aligning in our willingness to change it up, to experience the distressing dilemma that comes with change.
Mhm.
And that's where courage, commitment, and consistency pay off in spades.
Mhm.
So we can leave this lifetime on skidding in in a cloud of dust, all used up, right? I don't know who said that, but I love it. And it's like,
Yep.
yeah, here I am. There we go.
Yep. That's me.
Who cares about the messy kitchen? Let's just go have fun, right? It'll be what it is. It'll be there waiting for us. And to come back into that messy kitchen and go, wow, you know, what a ride.
Yeah.
I did what I needed to do and what I wanted to do, and so much more.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Cheryl. And I want to just raise a glass for your wisdom and your opportunity to share. And I look forward to where you're going to be taking people on their journeys. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you. Here's to fun.
So you've been listening to Be Well with Dr. Michelle Greenwell, and we wish you well. Thank you so much for listening today.